I spent a total of my life in and out of prison, probation, parole. I'm going to say at least about 30 years, starting from the time I was 17 years old. And I didn't finish meeting my criminal justice obligation until I was 50 years old.
YouTube, Facebook, RDAP Dan here, Federal Prison Time. Hope you guys are having an amazing day. Today is Monday, and as I promised, we have the amazing Randy Kearse with us today. He's going to be telling us all about his prison journey and how he went from basically a leader on the streets of different level of drug dealing to selling books and having an amazing success story, mentoring and speaking engagements. So welcome, Randy. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good, Dan. Thank you very much for inviting me on your show, man. I appreciate being here, and I appreciate the work that you're doing, man. So I'm doing good.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, we're definitely going to talk about your book in a few minutes, Randy, because as you guys can see, Randy's got a few books behind us, and it's kind of like a lesson plan where they all play a part and they play a role on each other, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But right now, the main thing that we want to talk about, Randy, is tell us a little bit about kind of how you got into this. Starting off with, you served a long period of time in prison, about 15 years, correct?
Yeah, my last term of incarceration was for 15 years in federal prison for possession with the intent to sell crack cocaine. Prior to that, I had been caught up in the criminal justice revolving door, the criminal justice system. I spent a total of my life in and out of prison, probation, parole. I'm going to say at least about 30 years, starting from the time I was 17 years old. And I didn't finish meeting my criminal justice obligation until I was 50 years old. Because when I came home after the 15 years from federal prison, I still had 10 years of supervised release. So from the time I turned 17, I was in and out, probation, jail, prison, and I got my last sentence of 15 years. So I've been in this business for a while, unfortunately.
How long have you been out now?
I've been out 13 years now. I came home in 2005. I was in from 92 to 2005, and I've been home since August of 2005. But I've been off of parole or probation, federal probation, since 2015.
So Randy, let's kind of go back to the beginning, and maybe not the very beginning, but to kind of how you got into this 15-year prison bid. Reading through some of the information in your book and some of the information I can find online, you weren't just dealing in drugs and getting in trouble. You weren't a low-level guy. From what I could read, you were actually like the head of a multi crew in like different areas in different cities and stuff. Not to glorify what you did by any means. I can see you already corrected me on that, but I do want to kind of get people on track with how you used that type of mentality from a hustle to getting people to follow you and you being able to lead people, how you eventually used that for good. But tell us a little bit about how you got into that and why you decided to go so large with it.
Well, I mean, from the time I was in the street and I got involved in selling drugs, it was almost a natural transition from growing up in my hood and being very popular and being known throughout, my hood and my community. And I come from a family, we were very known in our neighborhood. So, it was only destined that whatever I'd done, then I would be a leader. I would be a boss. As far as if I would have decided to go and open up a company before then or be an entrepreneur before then. So all of the skills that I had that I'm using now, I already had when I just, started selling drugs. But it's just I applied them to selling drugs. So when I decided to make that change from the lifestyle that I was living that took me to prison to the lifestyle that I'm living today, it's still I incorporate a lot of the same things that I had incorporated when I was on the street selling drugs to the business that I own today. So I was just destined to be someone who would be able to take something maybe that wasn't good, something that was bad, and turn it to something good.
How did it all fall apart? How did you end up finally getting wrapped up with the federal government to the point where you landed yourself in a 15-year prison bid?
Well, I had about probably like 5 years run of selling drugs, and I was going to different states, and I had maybe 20, 30 people working for me. I had a partner, and it was like we was doing what we was doing. And I mean, just like everybody, we always think we're invincible. So when you think you're invincible, you start making mistakes and you just start doing things differently. So when everything really started falling down, people started getting arrested and telling and, the whole 9 yards. So the indictment came down with the federal government. And at that time, I mean, it was pretty much the writing was on the wall that it was all over. I was wanted by federal agency. I was wanted by city agency in New York. So I pretty much, it was just all came crashing down after a while.
So it all came crashing down. And at this time, did you have any children? Were you married?
No, I wasn't married, but I had several children that I had fathered, when I was in the street. They were young. They were very young. Were
you in their life at all? Were these children that you were?
Not all of them.
Okay.
My probably like my 3 oldest, I was in their life. The other ones, I pretty much wasn't a part of their life. Unfortunately, that was a part of the lifestyle that we were living, that we would just be all over the place and having children by women, and it was just out of control. I was out of control. I know that for a fact. And it was just a sum of the life that I was living, that we didn't even, honestly and truthfully at that time, some of us didn't even really think we would live to be 50 or to be 40. People were dying. I mean, I was in this thing for real. This wasn't no game like people think it is, or they might read in a book, or they might see or hear about. I was in this thing for real. People died. People went to prison for the rest of their life. I mean, this was a very serious lifestyle. So we were just caught up in that mix, man.
I think this is why it's a really interesting interview to have you on, Randy, because the average person that's watching this video right now is probably in somewhere of a situation of a nonviolent offender, first-time offender, white-collar criminal that more than likely isn't looking at a potentially it might feel like a really long time that they're looking at right now, whether it be 3 years, 5 years, but most of them are probably going to be to camp or low. Most of them are out on pretrial services, like on bond. Most of them are going to be able to self-surrender. When the cops came, when the feds came.
I don't know anything about those things, man. I never self-surrendered. I never was given a bail. I was never given house arrest. Anytime that I was arrested, I was locked up. I don't even know what that feels like to self-surrender.
Randy's like, what's a prison consultant? What does self-surrender even mean?
Yeah, right.
What is a camp? They have camps? You mean I can play tennis? So tell us a little about. So you got picked up. You got indicted. What was that day like?
Man, that day sucked. The day that they come to get you.
Where were you?
I was in North Carolina.
I mean, were you at home? Were you on the street? Were you in your car?
I knew that you were looking for me, so I was on the run pretty much, trying to stay one step ahead of them, and avoid being captured. Pretty much that was my job at that time. But I got caught in a hotel. They found out through some other people that we were dealing with that we were staying at this hotel, and they came in the middle of the night, just like you see on Cops. That's how it really was before the show. We was on the show before the show came out. We came out the hotel. They got the shotguns, they got the spotlights, and and it was all said and done. But I already knew that they were looking for us. So when they caught us, it wasn't no surprise, to be honest with you. to know that you're wanted by the federal government, that's heavyweight. Back then, it was heavyweight because, I mean, for you to do something for the federal government to come down on you back then was, you were serious. It was serious.
So here you are. You're wrapped up in the feds. You knew the charges were pretty serious at this point. Sounds like you, up until this point, you've been in and out of the system from what you've told me and what I've read since you were a juvenile, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You knew this was different. You knew this wasn't going to be a catch and release.
Yeah. No, this wasn't no game. This wasn't no joke. I already knew pretty much that whatever happened, that I was going to be in there for quite a while. You know what I'm saying? So I already pretty much resigned to the fact that it was that part of the running was over. Now it was a matter of facing whatever charges that were coming up or whatever charges that they're going to have against me and dealing with that and then seeing where I came out after that.
So once you got taken that night in the hotel, where did they bring you? They brought you to county?
Yeah, they brought me to the county jail in North Carolina, process and everything like that. I already had, yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, I had a state of North Carolina warrant out for me too. So the state took possession of me first, and then the feds came and dropped the federal detain on me.
And how long did you sit there in this county from the time they got you until something started to happen?
Well, I mean, it was probably about 10 months because I had the state charge and I had the federal charge. So I was going back and forth through the two. So I would say about 10 months, 11 months before from the time that I got arrested to the time that I got sentenced, probably about 11 months.
So let's give people a little idea of what, because a lot of the guys and women that are watching this again, never been arrested. They've never stepped foot in county jail. What was the yard like at county? Could you walk the yard? Was there a handball court?
No, it wasn't no yard, man. When you're in the county jail, at least in North Carolina, there's no county jail. I mean, there's no yard. You are confined to almost like a floor. They call it blocks. You're confined to a block, and you stay on that floor for pretty much the duration of, whatever charge you're facing, going back in court. So and it's almost like you ever seen that the movie. I mean, this TV series 24 or something they have where they got guys going into county jail pretending to be the police or whatever the case may be. But anyway, you're locked you stay on that same floor. You don't go outside. Outside is like a big, like, open area, but you're still locked behind a door. And they have grates where the air comes in. You get to play a little basketball in the course of that.
It's enclosed. It's enclosed. Walls everywhere, and you might be able to see the sky, but that's about it.
Yeah. Outside, there's no yard. There's no going outside or anything like that. So you're pretty much stuck in a building. That's the best way I can say it, on a floor where there's cells and you're confined to that area.
And you're in there with pretty much everybody. It's a mix of people awaiting either sentencing, awaiting plea agreements. It's kind of murderers, rapists, to guys that are.
Yeah, you see guys going home. You see them coming back. They feed you. They feed you through a slot in the door. You can come out to eat, but they come with the trays and they pull up to the front of the dorm or whatever floor that you're on. They feed people, and they have a little day area where you can come out and watch TV and stuff like that. But pretty much you're stuck to that floor. But it can be anybody from a DWI, child support, all the way to serial killer. You can be in that area with.
What was the overall vibe in the county jail? When I say vibe, I mean, did it seem hopeless? Did people seem like they were living life, or what kind of was the energy in there?
Wow, man, the energy was more like, I mean, for those who were going home, if they were there for the weekend, they were happy. For those who know that they weren't going nowhere for a while, they were mad because they wasn't the guy going home for the weekend. So, I mean, it was a smorgasbord of different vibes, but you pretty much gravitated towards a vibe that fit your circumstance. Gotcha. So I'm not gonna mingle or interact with people that's going out in 2 days or 3 days. Like, I mean, really, I'm not going to really have anything too much that I want to say to them or befriend them because they're going home, you know? So, I mean, then you got guys that are in there for $100 bail. They can't get out. Nobody wants to come get them. They don't have $100. So they're in there for 30 days, 6 months, you know, because they can't come up with $100. So it's a lot of different things going on in there.
I imagine when you're in there in a situation, I spent some time in county, not years, but I spent about 10 months in county, and I could not wait for sentencing just to move on to a different spot. It was very much like a limbo, almost like purgatory. The food was horrible. There wasn't really anything to do. I started getting pale, and I think people that are getting ready to go to federal prison, especially if they're going to be going to a camp or a low, because they don't really have anything to relate to, the only thing they can relate to is what they see on TV, just like stuff you just mentioned, Locked Up Abroad or the TV show Oz, and that's what they imagine the federal prison experience being like at a camp or a low security, which you obviously know that's not the case at all. How hard of a struggle was this for who was the biggest influence in your life at that point? Who was somebody that was by your side?
My mother. I mean, that was the only one who was really by my side consistently. You know, so I mean, you're going to have people that drift in and out, you know, of your journey, but very few people are going to be consistent by your side, support you morally, maybe even financially, mentally, and things of that nature. So, I mean, I already pretty much knew when I was going away that I wasn't dependent on no woman to, you know, ride 15 years with me. Like, I mean, that would be insane to think somebody gonna wait 15 years for you. But I mean, some people do. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are women who do stick by their guy for that period of long time. I didn't have that kind of woman. You know what I'm saying? So,
what do they call them? Sponsors?
I don't even know what they call them these days, man. You know what I'm saying? I just know they call them loyal. They call them, you know. And one of the things that I talk about in my book, Change Your Game Plan, especially my personal story, is how I try to get men and women to understand, if you have someone in your corner, if you have someone supporting you and standing by your side, I mean, you have to respect and understand the sacrifices that they're making for you. You know what I'm saying? So it's only right that while you're in there, no matter how much time you're doing, that you do whatever you need to do to get yourself together, to work on yourself, to be able to better yourself, so you can show that person who is in your corner, who still believes in you, that the sacrifices they're making are not in vain, that it's not a waste of time, that it's not something that will you know, just go up and smoke once you get out. You're going to forget about all the things that you were supposed to do. So that's one of the missions that I'm on, is trying to get guys and women in there to understand that if you have someone, that you need to really be grateful, and you have to understand and be humble and work on yourself.
And that person for you is your mother.
That's my mother.
So now let's talk about, okay, so now you're in federal prison, and you've been at a few different custody levels, correct?
Yeah, I started off in